Recording starting now. And starting presentation. And here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so today's the last day I want to talk about nematodes. And we've been talking about nematodes in the suborder Spirurina. At our last meeting, we talked about ascaridomorphs, the big, yucky intestinal parasites, and oxyuridomorphs, which includes the pinworms. The last two are spiruromorphs and gnathostomatomorphs. Spiruromorphs certainly do include human parasites, but probably the best known here is heartworm, which I know you veterinary people have definitely heard of and possibly seen. If the screen is shaking a little bit, it's because this cat is sitting on the desk and licking herself. The other one, the gnathostomatomorphs, includes dracunculus, which is one of the most horrifying tropical diseases, but it's also one that has almost been eradicated. So starting with the spiruromorphs, that includes filaroid worms. Filaria refers to nematodes that have a stage in the the circulatory system. And filaroidea, these worms have an arthropod intermediate host, and the larvae, which can be extremely small, are spread by biting. In the case of canine heartworm, it's a mosquito. In the case of Wucheria bancrofti, it's also a mosquito. In other cases, it might be black flies. The larvae may be injected, or they may crawl into the bite wound. And then as adults, they will typically inhabit blood, lymphatic vessels, or in some cases, body cavities. So there you've got Wucheria right there. Ding. Mosquitoes pick up microfilaria larvae with a blood meal, and at this stage, they're only 10 microns wide, very, very narrow. The larvae molt in the mosquito twice, and the infective third stage larvae, L3 or J3, migrate to the mosquito's head, and they're not actually injected into the skin like malaria is, but they're deposited on the skin when the mosquito feeds, and they'll crawl right into the bite wound, travel through the circulatory system, and they end up in the human lymphatic system. This is where they mature, and the adults produce microfilaria larvae that migrate into the lymphatics, from there into the circulatory system, and they get picked up by mosquitoes. And I would sing "It's the Circle of Life" right now, but I don't want to wake my kid. So that's what that looks like. This is not, as far as I know, present in the United States itself. It tends to be a tropical disease. Some of the pictures I've got of infected people are a little disturbing, so brace yourselves. Just heard a ding dong. Okay, I've cut over because Samantha Hodges is just joining us. Good morning. We're talking about filarial nematodes. And I was just going over the life cycle of Wucheria, cause of a disease, the technical name for which is lymphatic filariasis. Ding. The stage that's actually transmitted from human to mosquito looks like this. These are microfilaria larvae, and in this species, the egg membrane is actually retained as a sheath. I assume this is protective from the immune system, although I don't really know. You can see individual nuclei with this stain, Their arrangement's important in species identification, and you might recall in lab when I was showing you microscope slides remotely, we saw some similar slides in the microfilaria of dirofilaria, which is the causative agent of canine heartworm, all those little dots. Ding. There's some biopsies of lymph nodes. All those round things that you're seeing in the center are just cross sections through coiled up Wucheria worms. This is a lymph node that's been sliced thin. So you're seeing cross sections through the worms at various angles. These hang out mostly in the lymphatic system and the lymph nodes. The sexes are separate, so males and females mate and release larvae, which travel into the blood via the thoracic duct. The thoracic duct is the interconnect between the lymphatic system and the circulatory system. Just a little thin-walled duct that drops into your, I think it's your vena cava, and returns the contents of the lymphatic system to the circulatory system. In most species, this is periodic. The larvae tend to come out at night, and that happens to be when the mosquitoes are out at night. So nice little timing there.
Does it change symptoms when the larvae leave the lymph nodes? Like if they go into the blood, does the patient suffer anything more?
The main symptoms that I know of don't result so much from the worms themselves, but from scarring and immune response in the lymphatic ducts. And that tends to be a very progressive thing, as you'll see in the next slide. Ding. Chronic inflammation can lead to blocking of the lymphatic ducts, and that means lymph can't drain, can't return to the circulatory system, and you end up with swelling of affected body parts, and the common name for this is elephantiasis. Apparently not all infections lead to this, but this is a common side effect of chronic inflammation of the lymphatic system. I think it's the next slide that is pretty gross, so brace yourselves. Ding. Yeah, there's an estimated 40 million people that suffer from this worldwide. This is from a case of lymphatic scrotum. Yeah. All right. But not everybody who's infected gets this. And again, this is not so much caused by the worms itself, it's caused by the immune response to the worms. You get growth of scar tissue, blockage of the lymphatic ducts, which just leads to further scarring and further damage. This is from a case report from a man from India who had 70 pounds of tissue surgically removed. I mean, you can see it causes terrible social problems and social stigma, to say nothing of pain and, psychological damage of having something like this happen to you. So the operation was very successful in, restoring the man's sense of, well-being. Okay, I'm going to make that go away. Ding. The other big human species in here, I think there are 8 filaroid worms that infect humans, but the other best known one is Onchocerca volvulus. This is another tropical diseases. It's one of what are called the neglected tropical diseases that have been targeted for elimination. Adults live in the skin. They cause itchy swellings, and long-term infection leads to clouding of the cornea, and that shaking is again caused by the fact that the cat has just jumped up. The common name for this is river blindness. It's prevalent in Africa and in South America as well. It's a tropical disease, and it's not fatal. Nobody's ever died of Onchocerca, but it's the second leading infectious cause of blindness in the world. The first is a bacterial disease called trachoma, and as a neglected tropical disease, there's global efforts underway to try to eradicate it. It used to be endemic in tropical parts of Mexico, but I believe it's been eradicated from Mexico. There's other countries where eradication efforts are underway. Vet people, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a related species that infects dogs and wolves. And since at least the 60s, there have been a few cases of Onchocerca lupi crossing over to humans. So that's a bit more obscure, but it's something that you might conceivably see.
If this really interests you, my group did a poster on this one.
Oh, okay. Good on you.
I'm still proud of it, and I showed my family, and they were thoroughly disgusted.
Well, good. That was the idea. You can
Yep.
put it up in the family bathroom.
Well, some of them got put up in Lewis, but everyone's more grossed out by Nick and Jessica's. But my family's grossed out by mine. That's what matters.
Okay. Good to hear. All right. I don't know. Is there like a gas station in Mountain View where you could find an? Never mind.
I can
Don't
just
leave
toss
your
them out
house
my
for
window
something
at
that's
people as
silly.
they go by. I'll be gross
What's
like
that?
that. I can just paper plane it at people as they walk past my window. That'd be terrible.
All right. Ding. Also in the Filaroidia is the African eyeworm, which is spread by deer flies. Adults in this case live in connective tissues, live in fascia, the sheets and bands of tough connective tissue that surround muscles and what's fascia, sheet-like tendons and things like that. Some of these infections are asymptomatic, but bad ones can cause what's called calabar swellings on the face and body. You're right. My wife reminds me that fascia includes the stuff that you kind of have to pull off the chicken before you cook it. Skin, but also the tough connective tissue that holds the skin to the muscle. I know you guys know this now because the state bird of Arkansas is, of course, the Tyson chicken.
Can your
Uh,
wife co-lecture?
Sorry?
Can she co-lecture with you?
Um, Maybe once you get some, maybe now's not quite the time, but when she gets a little more dressed, possibly. Right. Bad infection cause swellings on the face and body called calabar swellings, and also they sometimes migrate to the eye. We have a terrific chance to watch them swimming past. Ding. I'm going to make that go away. There's a microfilaria of loa loa. They hang out in the lungs, but they enter the bloodstream during the day, and that happens to be when the deer flies are most active. So you've got a nice case of the evolution of behavior that's synchronous with the behavior of the intermediate host. You know, I'm not sure exactly how it's done, but these microfilaria have evidently evolved the ability to know when it's time to catch the bus. And ding. And then, oh, sorry about that. Vet people, you've probably seen something like this. I didn't think to bring it with me, but at UCA, we've actually got a dog heart um, showing this infection. This is Dirofilaria immitis, the cause of canine heartworm. It doesn't cause heart failure in humans and it doesn't mature sexually, but you can get circulatory damage. You can get lumps of scar tissue in the pulmonary blood vessels called granulomas, which is something you really don't want to get. But it's certainly dangerous for dogs. I believe also for, I believe cats can get this too. And a good reason why you should treat your dogs for heartworm every summer. Right? Right. Ding.
We recommend year-round protection.
Year-round protection. All right.
Yep.
Okay, take it from one who knows. Treat your dog for heartworm. You don't want him to get that. Ding. And then finally, the last group, the naphostomatids, includes dracunculus. Um, Dracunculus is pretty damn horrifying because the adults live in human tissues. And when a female is ready to lay her eggs, she creates a burning blister, and her hind end begins emerging from the blister. And when you've got this burning blister, this very painful sensation, the first thing you want to do is go soak the blister in cool water. And that is the adult worm's cue to start laying eggs into the water. The eggs are picked up by little crustaceans, copepods, and that's where the juveniles develop. And then humans are infected by drinking water that's got infected copepods in it. Once you start getting this blister, the treatment is to wind the worm out on a stick. And this can take weeks because the worm is about 3 feet long. While this is happening, you can walk around a bit, but you can't get around very well. You have to be very slow about this because if the worm ruptures, those body fluids cause worse inflammation. This can be a problem with Ascaris as well. If one of the worms bursts, the fluids tend to cause a very bad inflammatory response.
I missed how you said the female lays the eggs in the water, and then how does a copepod get it? Do they become larvae or they get eaten?
They hatch in the water, and the larvae are eaten by a copepod.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think I've actually got the order of slides reversed there, but the gnathostomatomorphs include dracunculus. Yeah, the eggs are laid in. Oh, okay. The female releases larvae directly into the water. The larvae get eaten by a copepod. They mature in the copepod, and then when a human drinks unfiltered water, they get passed to humans. They reproduce in the stomach and intestine, and then the mature female worm migrates to the surface of the skin and causes that blister.
Okay, one more question. Can you spell gnathostomatid in the chat? Because I missed it.
It's here on. Are you seeing this slide that I'm looking at?
Aha! Sorry, it wasn't on the last one.
Okay. All right. And this thing is pretty horrifying, but it's also one of the great success stories because in the 1980s, there were over 3 million cases of this a year, all over Africa, and I believe actually as far east as, I think it was as far as east as India and Pakistan at one point. But you have to swallow a live copepod in your drinking water to get this. And that creates a very easy place where you can break the life cycle, and that is filtering your water. And over 23 million drinking straws with mesh filters have been distributed in Africa. There you can see a little boy who's using his drinking straw to slurp up some water. This is, and I've talked about this before. I know I talked about it with hookworm, and I think I've mentioned it elsewhere. I think when we talked about mosquito netting controlling malaria, I mentioned this is not something that has to be made in the West and then is, handed out to, the Africans. This can be made locally. It's very cheap. It doesn't take any special knowledge to make something like this. It provides work for local artisans instead of just for, Western companies. And it's a way to get the people on your side. And we've talked about this before. If you come in and say, here, I figured out a cure for this. Here, all of you do exactly as I say and everything will be fine. Oh, people are going to resist. I mean, hell's bells. We're seeing it with the damn coronavirus right now. That, you know, people do not always trust experts who are coming from outside of their communities and, you know, the channels that they have come to trust and the people that they're familiar with. But if you can get people themselves to, um, you know, help you with their own solutions, you get much better response than if you do if you come in as an outsider. And once this was introduced in a few villages, people from one village would go to people from the next village and say, look, we tried this. It actually really works. You know, they could explain it in the local language. They could explain it using metaphors that people were familiar with. You know, they could explain from personal experience that this was effective. And educational materials could be made to fit local tastes. Here you've got a couple of kids in Ghana. You'll notice both of their feet are bandaged. That's because they're recovering from dracunculus infection. And you can see them reading a comic book. I don't know if you can read the title. It says dracunculiasis, or guinea worm. And there's a picture of a woman who's immersed her feet in water, which is what you're not supposed to do. And so this is an example about how getting the local communities on your side has been responsible for this. Ding. 1986, there were 3.5 million cases. It was present in every African country, all of the ones shaded in green. And I believe that earlier it was present even farther east into the subcontinent. As of 2015, which was the latest date that I could find this poster, there were 22 cases. There were 19 so far in 2018, and I couldn't find the stats for 2019, but it's down to a handful of cases a year. There's a few cases that result because the worm can also infect dogs, and it tends to persist among fishing communities where dogs scavenge discarded fish and fish guts and drink infected water. They can get this as well. So I don't believe it's been completely eradicated, but it is on track to be knocked out completely. The second major disease to be eradicated globally, the first, of course, being smallpox. And there's hope that we can do the same for things like river blindness as well. The Carter Center, by the way, Jimmy Carter's charity, has been instrumental in doing this, and we're finally on the cusp of victory. So, yay for Jimmy Carter. My wife, being from Georgia, is a fan of Jimmy Carter. Yeah, my wife would like to add that when she was a kid, she actually wore some hand-me-downs from was it Amy Carter?
Yeah, Amy.
Yeah, she actually wore some of Amy Carter's hand-me-downs. Okay. All right. Questions, comments? Rotten fruit?
Seeing the worm on the matchstick has made me nauseous in a way I haven't been nauseous since I was a child, so congrats on that.
There's a story in the Bible, in Exodus, I believe, where the Israelites have escaped from Egypt. They're wandering in the desert, and they're attacked by a plague of fiery serpents. And what Moses does is make a bronze serpent on a stick and hold it up, and whoever looks at it is healed from the plague of fiery serpents. This is one of many things in the Bible where we may not have context to understand what, if anything, the author really meant. It's one of those weird stories that probably doesn't make it into the sermons that often. But it's been suggested that what happened to the Israelites was they were getting attacked by dracunculus, which certainly does look like a serpent and does certainly create fiery sensations when it tries to burrow out of you. And that what Moses really did was make a model showing how to wind the worm out on a stick. So I have no idea whether that might be true or not, but dracunculus did extend into the Middle East until fairly recently, so there may well be something to it. I don't know. So yeah, maybe I should have included a picture of Moses holding up the brazen serpent on the pole. And a serpent on a pole is also the emblem of the Greek god Asclepius, the god of healing. And it's been suggested that that symbol might be, that symbol might be originate as a model for showing you how to get rid of dracunculus.
Asclepius is the first doctor symbol, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the rod of Asclepius is a single pole with a serpent wrapped around it. The medical profession these days uses a pole with two serpents wrapped around it and wings. That's not the rod of Asclepius, that's the rod of Mercury, who was the Roman patron of commerce and also of thieves. So that's a good symbol for insurance companies to use, but doctors probably should go back to the original. It got mixed up a little bit. More than you wanted to know, I'm sure.
No, I like learning fun facts like that. That's like fun stuff. Not fun, but interesting.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Any further questions? Okay, my wife says hello.
Hello.
All right. Okay, and recording is